Thank you for joining us today for our 2022 in review and preparing for 2023 at the FDA. It has been a full year for FDA this year as they've gotten back to normal from the pandemic. Slowly but surely they're getting back to normal. And there are a lot of topics that we are going to try to get through in the next 30 minutes. Regulator reminder, FDA healthy definition, the sesame allergen designation, homeopathic drug product guidance, updated FDA guidance for medical device software, bills to watch, either this year or that will be reintroduced next year. Class action is always at the top of our list, and our next favorite one, Prop 65. So hopefully this will be an informative session for everyone. There is an area where you can give us, ask questions and everything. And joining to me today, I totally forgot, sorry, is my partner, Claudia Lewis. She's the co-chair of the FDA group, and she is probably my favorite person at Venable. So there we go. We've known each other a long, long time.
We have.
Yeah, I think this is like since 1993, so 94, so almost, oh my God, I'm getting old. That's like almost 30 years, Claudia.
Almost 30 years. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, yeah. So everyone, we're going to start off with my favorite new rule or definition, healthy. I will state from the outget, FDA needs to get out of defining terms like healthy. A healthy claim is an implied nutrient content claim. And up to this point, it was very, very restrictive of what could be considered healthy. So olive oil would not be considered healthy under the old definition. It's now considered healthy under the new definition. Yet coconut oil, which has all these other health benefits, is not considered healthy because it has too much saturated fat. So there are still many, many inconsistent issues within the use of the term healthy. FDA tried to do their best, but it also showed the difficulty it is in trying to define words that have meaning to maybe to lawyers, to regulators, but probably don't help consumers all that much anyway. But this is FDA's thought process, and admittedly, they have allowed a greater amount of foods to be made that can be healthy, but yet you have juice is healthy, honey is not healthy. At least FDA asked for comments on tea and coffee, whether that's healthy, but again, they view it from a zero calorie approach rather than what are the benefits of a particular food. Doesn't talk about all the polyphenols and catechins and everything that's inside teas. It doesn't talk about the antiviral and antibacterial benefits of consuming honey. And then there's even the bigger issue, and Claudia and I discussed this earlier today, is that are dietary supplements healthy? How do they fit into this regime? Because when you read the rule, I can only think of protein products, the supplements that may actually fit into that definition of healthy. Or is healthy non-nutritive? What is a non-nutritive use of healthy? Is supporting a healthy immune system non-nutritive? Is it non-nutritive for a dietary supplement, but nutritive for a food? These are all things that I don't think FDA considered in when it promulgated this rule. And the problem is that the nutritional science changes all the time. Mm-hmm. So FDA admits, low-fat diets really aren't good for you. Well, why don't you get rid of low-fat claims? That's number one. And because we all know that if you look at the trajectory of diabetes and obesity in the United States, it all tracks along that lines of getting rid of the fat out of the food and putting simple carbs into it. We don't treat all sugars the same in this rule. So there's a lot of issues in this rule because FDA narrowly focused in on what is broader, narrowly focused in still on kind of this macro and micronutrient content, as opposed to all the other benefits of food, all the polyphenols and all the catechins and all the other phytochemicals in food that impart health. What do you think, Claudia?
And so the other thing I would say, Todd, is that jumped out at me, and this was a Herculean task. Like, I don't know that I would have raised my hand if someone was like, please define the term healthy. I think that we talked about this earlier. It was astonishing to me that 2-year-olds, that products for children 2 or younger were not included in this definition, or would be disqualified, actually. I thought it was very interesting that we were looking at mainly whole foods or conventional foods. And I think that when we look at the term healthy, we were really looking at it from a perspective of trying to reduce obesity. And I think that obesity is a very complicated state of health, and it takes a holistic approach. And I'm just not really sure that this definition was as holistic as it could have been.
I think there are better ways to handle the word healthy, and that is, how does it fit into a healthy lifestyle?
Yes, exactly.
And rather than try to pick and choose winners within there, because within a group, I think my favorite one is olive oil good, avocado oil good, coconut oil bad. And it ignores all the research on the benefits of coconut oil and the health benefits of coconut oil. Juice good, honey bad. Well, okay, they're both full of sugar, but you're ignoring all the other positive benefits we know we get from honey. The idea that they even had solicit comments on tea and coffee, maybe most of us don't understand, but most of us get our antioxidants every day through coffee and tea, not through eating fruits and vegetables, because let's face it, most of us don't eat fruits and vegetables in enough amounts per day. And I worry about how planned fraternities are going to interpret this rule.
Yes. I think that there's a whole categories of products that are not going to qualify. And I think that if you do manage to qualify, that there's still lots of questions about whether that's true or not, for the reasons you mentioned, Todd. Like, is it just the fact that it's avocado oil, or should there be other considerations as to whether it's really healthy or not? What do consumers really view as healthy? So I do really feel like we might satisfy FDA in some respects, but it leaves us still very vulnerable with the plaintiff's bar, which I think everyone was hoping that this new guidance from the FDA would close some of those doors a little bit.
No, I don't think it will, because when you start looking at things that are maybe naturally produced but really are nothing but liquid sugar, I think those type of products are vulnerable. But I agree that to a certain extent, do you want your kids drinking orange juice or do you want your kids drinking soda? We'll probably take orange juice over soda. But
I think that's right.
You're picking winners and losers, and understanding that all of these things are complicated. And FDA try to simplify it, but in many ways, they became overly broad and overly narrow at the same time. That's a pretty good feat to do. You can be overly broad and overly narrowed all at one time.
So now all of a sudden salmon is healthy, but other product categories are not healthy. It's very interesting. But we have until December 28th to get comments into the FDA. I think that typical with when comments are due to the agency, we can anticipate that this date is going to be extended. And I think that I can't wait to see what the industry responds to the FDA on this.
Yeah. So we've gone through it. So we go to the next slide.
Yeah. So the next issue that Todd and I thought was interesting to raise is something that has been, out in the public for a long time, but is actually coming to become effective, is that sesame is added as a major food allergen. So it's been quite some time since FDA has added an allergen to the, top 8 allergens and all the requirements that come along with it. And so sesame, which, I've had friends who have allergies to sesame. One, it's in a lot of different products. And because of its protein content, does trigger allergies. I think that the FDA decided it had to be added to the list because of the proliferation of it in the marketplace. But also because sometimes sesame can be in a spice blend and not be declared under current FDA regulations. And so FDA is not suggesting that we have to change the way we declare spices, but they're saying that when the spice blend contains sesame, that it has to be included in the allergen contained statement. So they have some specific suggestions for how to accomplish that. And that is supposed to go into effect day one of next year.
Obviously, there'll be food labels out there that won't cover it, but I think it's important that FDA actually said you could say spices, parenthetical sesame. Best practices though is to always use a contained statement, and I don't say that from an FDA perspective, because if you list the ingredient, technically under the law, you don't have to have a contained statement. But from a product liability standpoint, I would always recommend to my clients always use the contained statement as well.
Right. It just stands out a little bit more. And for people, so let's say you're just a little bit allergic, but if you had seen it, you would avoid the product. I think that for that product liability purposes, it's always best to have that standout piece. The next topic is something that's near and dear to both mine and Todd's heart. And Todd, I'll let you sort of go over this. I know that you've been working on this the last couple of days.
So this is FDA finally finalized their draft guidance document on homeopathic drugs. Basically, FDA has said that they're going to take a risk-based approach to whether they will take action against homeopathic drugs. What the worst thing about this document is that FDA officially states, and it's now in their official policy, that these are all unapproved new drugs. So there is some concern that we may start seeing plaintiff litigation again start to pick up against these type of products. And it's not even quite clear FDA is even using the correct standard, because FDA would say they're not what we call GRAS-E, or generally recognized as safe and effective. However, what standard are they using? Are they using allopathic standards, which is most conventional doctors, and pharma? Well, pharma and conventional doctors would say homeopathic drugs are not GRAS-E. Yet, their homeopathic physicians would beg to differ significantly. So who is really the appropriate experts in this area? So is this guidance document flawed from the beginning because FDA automatically took an approach from the allopathic standpoint as opposed to the non-allopathic standpoint? But in essence, it probably doesn't change much from the CPG guide they had. Most of these homeopathic products will stay on the market. As long as they don't have an ingredient that FDA thinks is unsafe. One that comes to mind is belladonna. However, if anybody knows anything about homeopathic medicines, belladonna is not really in the product at the end. It's so diluted, it would never be a safety issue. And I think they're going to take a closer look at the purpose of the use of the products to make sure that they are self-limiting and not for serious diseases or so forth. But the priorities are first and follow products with reports of injury that after evaluation raise potential safety concerns, products that contain or purport contain ingredients associated with potentially significant safety concerns, products intended to be used for the prevention or treatment of serious and or life-threatening diseases or conditions. The last one really would be the prescription homeopathic world, where homeopathic physicians are prescribing it. I'm not so sure how much FDA really wants to get into that kind of morass where they can tell a homeopathic physician what they can and cannot prescribe. But that's where we are. It's really going to be centered on safety, but there's potentially unintended consequences. Will retailers be concerned about these products now that FDA says they're unapproved new drugs? They've said it, so is Amazon now going to delist these products, or will they go the way of NAC, in which once FDA said we're exercising enforcement discretion, we're okay with it? My gut is that Amazon will go down that route, the latter route, as opposed to the former.
But I think that this risk-based approach, I think it leaves you vulnerable with the retailers, consumers, but I also feel like it leaves us vulnerable to the plaintiffs bar, where FDA sort of, had a policy place that retracts the policy and come up with this different approach. It's not different, Todd, you and I know, than what the FDA had been doing. I just don't think that the FDA anticipated that the homeopathic industry would be nearly as large and become such what I consider to be mainstream. And I also feel like there's a couple of products out there probably that, went over the limits in terms of both the appropriateness and safety considerations. I just wish that there was a way for FDA to be a little bit more concise as to what's going to be acceptable and what's not going to be acceptable, as opposed to this case-by-case approach.
And I wish they would just drop the fact that these are all unapproved new drugs.
Yes, and that is the language that disturbs me the most too.
And the problem with that is that FDA can say whatever they want in a policy document, knowing there's no consequences to them. So what we mean by that is that no homeopathic manufacturer can actually sue FDA over that policy guide and say that these are not, you're not applying the right standard, because it goes back to, regardless of what is grass seed, and is grass seed what allopathic and conventional pharmaceutical it is, or is grass seed, or the relevant experts, people who are experts in homeopathy. If we look at a case that dealt with a dietary supplement, the Bayer case, in which the FTC had one gastroenterologist who knew nothing about probiotics, he just didn't believe in them, and Bayer had 5 experts in probiotics. The judge told the FTC their expert was an expert in probiotics. So who is the relevant expert? And has FDA even considered that? I don't think they have.
I don't think they have either. And I think that the other piece to that, and you mentioned it here too, is that the substantiation for these products. I think that FDA probably is going to be the most manageable part of the whole homeopathic review. I think substantiation for these types of products and what the plaintiff's bar is thinking about is really probably a taller reach.
I agree. Claudia will take the next slide.
Yes, absolutely. So this is something that I've been working on. I have 2 clients who are dealing with medical device software. And one client is very confident that they are a medical device and wants FDA sort of stamp of approval. And I have another client who really wants to be in the general wellness category. And so FDA has issued some new guidance for software and mobile medical applications, and what would be deemed a medical device and won't be deemed a medical device. And really it's a matter of, do I need to get FDA to say, acknowledge a Me Too application, which is a 510K, or can I just go out into the marketplace without any FDA approval? And I think that now that we're at the holiday season, everyone's getting their Pelotons and updating their Fitbits and doing all kinds of heart monitoring, and there's all kinds of products out there so that we can all track individually our health status. And I think that depending on the functionality of the software, FDA is saying, you know what, the information you're giving to the consumer is about the heart rate, but the way that the heart rate is being evaluated and monitored is really a device type scenario. So we're going to ask you for a 510K. And so any devices, the software that provides algorithm and output certain types of data, the FDA is going to really scrutinize it for its device status. But if really you're just looking at software functions that use sort of a checklist and common information that you can find on WebMD, the FDA is like, that might not be a medical device that you're really not diagnosing or treating or curing. So it really is another scenario where we're sort of getting some good feedback from the FDA that they don't want to overregulate this new, digital age information, if you will. But they want to make sure that, people who need to get to the doctor are getting to the doctors, and that certain testing parameters, which the FDA has traditionally regulated, are not sort of being snuck in under the auspices of software and now avoiding FDA review.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because I can see from a client perspective the advantages of going through it, because then if everybody else wants to say, oh, we don't have to go there, but you can say you're FDA cleared.
Yes.
People, that's got marketing value to it.
It does. And I think that my clients who are in two different positions, that is the marketing value that they really are sort of looking at in terms of, and the growth potential. So once you've gotten the 510K cleared, it's sort of easier to get to the next iteration of the device, right? So you don't have to kind of keeping it so kind of vanilla, if you will, if you want to be unregulated.
Agreed. Okay. Food Safety and Landmark Advancement Act. This is a heavy subject in the dietary supplement world. Mandatory product listing proposal would require listing of all dietary supplement products and ingredients with FDA. Well-intentioned, but with several unintended consequences. There's also companion language that the introduction or delivery for introduction into interstate commerce of any product marketed as a dietary supplement that does not meet the definition of a dietary under Section 201 FF is a prohibited act. That language is not necessary. It's already a prohibited act. But putting that aside, that would have implications for NAC, CBD, NMN. It would have consequences of all of that. All this impacts good actors more than bad actors, to be honest with you. Whether it gets through, I probably still think it's dead on arrival this year. However, there's no doubt at some point it's going to be back next year. This has bipartisan support. So it's not a Democrat Republican issue. But the unintended consequences is that it doesn't change anything. It's not enforceable. And this is what I mean by not enforceable. The bad actors out there are not going to register their products with FDA. They're just not going to do it. They're not going to list and register with FDA. And we know how the internet is today. You don't have to be on a major website. You don't have to be on Amazon or Walmart.com. People market these products all the time through emails and everything. They're not going to be caught by any of this. But yet, if you're listing your products and you're giving it to FDA and you have the label claims, you're going to see potentially for a lot more courtesy letters being sent out. We don't think these claims are appropriate. We have questions about this ingredient. The way FDA defines new dietary ingredients, putting aside the preclusion issue, I would still say 70% of all ingredients out there in any year are new dietary ingredients that have never been notified by FDA. And it might even be higher than that, because FDA thinks that any iteration, any new concentration takes you into an NDI, or new salt of vitamin C would be an NDI. So the unintended consequence is that a lot of the good companies that get hit. It's not going to be the bad companies that get hit. So there's not really, I don't see the necessary benefit because it does nothing to stop the practices of bad company. If you really want to stop the bad practices, the practices of bad companies, it's very simple. You have to have, you can do mandatory product listing, but make it clear that it's the manufacturer's duty to list the product. And if they don't list it, every product they manufacture is considered adulterated as a matter of law. That would probably get you from 50 to 60% compliance to probably 95% compliance. Again, I think it's a feel-good legislation. It makes it, oh, we're doing something. But in reality, it doesn't change the dynamic all that much.
And the truth of it, Todd, I think you said this earlier, is that FDA has access to all this information anyway. The instruction function submissions, FDA does a lot of import evaluation on product ingredients and website reviews. This just seems to me, what I would consider to be a little bit of busy work. Like, we're going to submit all this information, and is FDA really going to do anything about it or do anything with it?
And I really worry about 201FF a lot. And the reason I say that is that that gives them a specific statutory provision that they don't really need. And have I lost everybody? What happened there? Hello?
No, you're still there.
Okay, something came up my screen. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. But FDA can look at these. Well, we don't think that's a dietary ingredient or a dietary substance. Therefore, you don't meet the definition of 201FF. For instance, FDA splits hair on what amino acids are permitted and what amino acids are not permitted under the act. So you're giving them a ability to go, we're pointing to this statute and we're going to go after that. The good news is that it'll take them 5 years to bring an action anyway. They're notoriously slow, absent a safety issue.
Yes, I think that's right. And speaking of, more, expanding the jurisdiction of the FDA, I think many of you know that cosmetics are regulated by the agency, but on a very low level. There's, no requirement that you are registered with the FDA, that FDA doesn't have good manufacturing practices assigned to cosmetics specifically. And so this act has been coming up again and again and again. And it was reintroduced in 2021, and I think it's going to be reintroduced again next year as well. And it would just give FDA more authority over cosmetics in terms of registration, disclose ingredient list for all the cosmetic products in the registered facility. FDA will now have authority to do a safety review of ingredients and non-functional constituents. And that the FDA would look to and start implementing good manufacturing practices. And I think that your comment there, Todd, is like, I think we would get some regulations, but it'll be a long time from now. And I think the cosmetic industry has been relatively safe. So I'm with you as to whether we really need this.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I want to say that we could use some new regulation is what we discussed earlier, is that the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act is antiquated.
Yeah, it is.
It's just antiquated. It does not take into consideration that food is medicine. It is, whether we like it or not. People take dietary supplements because they have aches and pains in their joints, not because they have healthy joints. People use lotions and things on their hands because it doesn't reduce the appearance of fine lines or wrinkles. It reduces fine lines and wrinkles. I can see where we could go where we need a reboot of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, but something that makes more sense to take in consideration how consumers actually use things and what the purpose of those things are, especially when they're over the counter. I agree that prescription drugs should be more heavily regulated. But when we're looking at these things, we should come up with a structure that if there's stuff, fine lines and wrinkles, why would you even want to send warning letters over that? If people want to think it reduces their fine lines and wrinkles, so be it.
Right.
Let it. So I think all these things that are being proposed really show you that we're piecemealing things together rather than doing what really needs to be done. And that is it's time for the 2022 version or 23 version of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, not piecemeal legislation that may or may not make sense.
Let's see if I can get there we go. I think we're running low on time, Todd, but I did think that we could wrap up with this. I think this is very important. That I think you've heard both Todd and I talk a fair amount about the plaintiff's bar. In a lot of ways, I do feel like they're creating more rules and regulations and causing the food and drug industry to move in different ways faster than the FDA or even the FTC or even NAD in some certain ways. Flavor and color claims are top on the plaintiff's bar list. There's some very antiquated flavor and color claims, sort of very consistent with your comment, Todd, that the Food and Drug Cosmetic needs to be updated. And, there's some very antiquated rules around it, and they're very technical, and not is not intuitive. They're not sort of intuitive at all. But the plaintiff bar picked up on these little nuances and says you're in violation. And in certain states like California, you have to write big checks.
Right. So if you have a natural flavor that mimics another natural flavor, that's an artificial flavor.
Exactly.
So, and people are using natural flavors not in the context of that. They're usually, when people think of artificial flavors, they think something synthetic. But yes, a natural flavor that mimics another natural flavor that is an artificial flavor under the regulations. They're very.
So, for example, if you're using, cherry and watermelon to make a stronger strawberry taste, and both those, the cherry and the watermelon or strawberry are natural, the FDA still says it's artificial.
And we have clients all the time that I think they just probably roll their eyes at us and like, this is stupid. And it probably is, but actually this is something the FDA could change themselves. It's a regulation.
Yes.
And why don't we clarify the regulation? When people think of artificial colors, they're actually thinking of FD&C certified colors. They're not thinking about the beet extract. But if you put beet extract to make something that would be normally blue-red, then that's actually artificial color.
Right. All color is artificial in the minds of FDA.
Yeah.
The other one that's coming, and is coming fast and furious, is per serving per capsule challenges. So when you declare that something is 750 milligrams on the label, but you mean consumers need to take 3 capsules in order to achieve that, the plaintiff's bar is considering that false and misleading.
Yeah, and the CBD industry is ripe for this. They love to put, 5,000 milligrams of CBD on the front of the bottle, but it's only 25 milligrams per serving or something like that. And if you put 5,000 milligrams in the front of the label, plaintiff attorneys would argue that one serving is 5,000 milligrams and probably one pill on top of it all.
Right.
And unfortunately, the silliness of the Ninth Circuit agrees that the supplement facts box is the fine print on the label. Literally, they said that. But, we expect that out of the Ninth Circuit.
So we have to be careful with those because they are coming up robustly in a way that you wouldn't anticipate. The other piece that has been a surprise to all of us is structure function challenges are coming up fast and furious as well. So if you have vitamin C or using vitamin D or using E, what I consider to be sort of like your tried and true, essential nutrients, the plaintiff's bar is challenging whether those products are one, essential, despite the fact that FDA has established a recommended daily intake for some of them. And they're challenging whether they're essential for whatever you're claiming them to be. So this is an example, but this is how silly it can be. So it's not far off some of the challenges that we receive, question about whether calcium really does help support strong bones. And so those types of what I consider to be, the earth is actually round and not flat type truths are being challenged by the plaintiff's bar at this time. So go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I was going to say, or we've seen things like with vitamin D as being not essential. We're deficient with vitamin D in this country. Of course, that's even more absurd because here we know that even magnesium, we generally don't get enough magnesium in our diet. It's just, that's life. It is. And by the way, the word healthy is not going to change that. You're still probably not going to get the amount of micronutrients you need through your daily diet because it's just really difficult to do so. But this is where we are. And the problem is the courts actually entertain the stupidity of these type of claims. And maybe it's time that we just simply, Congress preempt all these claims.
Well, and I also think that, Todd, we can certainly hope that Congress will preempt things, but there's been, cosmetic, act has been up for a long time and still hasn't gone anywhere. I do think that it's time for us to think as an industry, like which types of, calcium doesn't support strong bones. Like, what are we going to litigate, and what are we going to do it as a team, or are we going to team up with FDA? Because I just feel like the plaintiff's bar is constantly gaining ground where it's not in complete alignment with where the science sort of sits.
Well, the part of the problem with the plaintiff bar is that they know how much, for a lot of them, they're willing to settle these cases for between anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 privately, knowing that it doesn't matter whether they win or lose. Your client's going to spend, if they litigate it fully through class certification, they're going to spend $300,000. Right. So they're very good at pricing it to make it enticing to settle.
Yes, they do. But these are the types of things that are coming up that have, stem from the FDA, but are not sort of the FDA is not making the final decision or even taking enforcement action around it. And we just wanted everyone to be aware. And as we, sort of careen towards 2023, I feel like I just had 4th of July. I can't believe the holiday season is here. We just wanted to have sort of a quick check in with everyone, say hello, wish everyone a happy holiday, and say, these are the things that we've been grappling with, and this is what we plan to open the year with next year. If you need any help or have any questions with anything that we said today or something that we didn't mention, please give us a call. You know where to find Todd and I. Thank you so much, and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.